Welcome to a special episode of Cosmic Road, where I have the legendary Stephen Bassett, founder of the Paradigm Research Institute, Hollywood UFO Disclosure Alliance, and of course, the United States' first and maybe only UFO lobbyist. Welcome to Cosmic Road, Stephen.
Look, I was the first lobbyist back in 1996, and I remain the only one for many years. But about maybe 4 or 5 years ago, a couple people registered. Now I think there's 6 or 7, including the MUFON has hired a substantial law firm. The lobbying firm. I mean, the real deal.
Well, that's great.
Trained.
You've started a trend.
Well, yeah, I planted a flag. But back in '96, I couldn't lobby. I was a lobbyist. I couldn't lobby. I can go up the hill and say, "Hey, you want to talk about UFOs?" And they go, "I don't think so," and I've got an appointment. Uh, but that's okay. I planted that flag. I started the first political action committee. Couldn't do much with it. Couldn't raise much money, but I planted that flag. Uh, and that's something, right? But then with that platform as sort of my entrance ticket, I then focused really on lobbying the media. And I really pounded away at the media to try to get them to cover it more, to engage it, to do interviews. Uh, I started a huge media archive that now has 15,000 articles linked where you can go and read everything they've done, covered it, and it's really quite substantial. And but I think after 28 years, I'm about to uh, convert Paradigm Research Group to a think tank, nonprofit 501(c)(3), and it'll be doing think tanky things. And then I personally, I'll still be registered as a lobby. I'm going to register under my name, not PRG, though a think tank can do some lobbying. And I'm going to actually start lobbying.
Okay,
It's
nice.
yeah. There's actually people up on the hill talking UFOs all the time, and
Yeah,
I just need to get in
we've
front
actually
of them.
reached a point where we might have a designated special select committee devoted to UAP.
We already have a UAP caucus.
That's right.
I'll tell you, we put it this way. I have no trouble with a actual committee, a congressional committee assigned to this issue, but not to UFO UAP, but to disclosure or the post-disclosure world. In other words, no, let me rephrase that. The time to set up a political, a congressional or Senate committee or subcommittee dealing with this issue is after the president has disclosed and confirmed the extraterrestrial presence, not before. It's already been proven 100 times over. The world gets it, and we're just embarrassing ourselves at this point. So we need to get disclosure first, and then obviously both the Senate and the House will probably want full, not just subcommittees, full committees on this issue, since it will be the most important issue in the world, frankly, but not before. Right now, I'm happy to have a UAP caucus in the House, thanks to Tim Burchett, and we could we could be happy to have a UAP caucus in the Senate, though we really already have that in the person of 17 members of the Senate Intel Committee. They're really the UAP caucus in the Senate, so we have enough to get this close this out. Just a couple things need to happen, and we can get to the post-disclosure world.
You don't think that a select committee would be helpful as far as like subpoena power, bringing forth witnesses and, raising the visibility of this so that we can get a little closer to transparency and
Yep.
disclosure?
Except that we already have committees that can do that. The Senate Intel Committee is perfectly appropriate for this. We don't want to spend time forming a brand new committee and all that goes along with that. Now, that's just going to put disclosure further off. There are a number of committees that are more than appropriate to bring in witnesses to testify regarding UAP. And so we don't need a new committee, except after disclosure, yes. This issue more than warrants. But they may start off slow, make it a subcommittee of the House and Senate Intel Committee. The House Intelligence Committee Subcommittee on Extraterrestrial Affairs. Same thing for the Senate. That's fine. Happy to be a consultant to all of them. Call me.
They better, they should. Speaking of embarrassing ourselves, what did you make of the Arrow report?
Uh, yeah, it was a disgrace, of course. And I have said as much. In fact, I've said a lot. Uh, I've been tapping into my darker side um, because I'm mad. There's no question. There's plenty of people that are angry. So, in just a few words, the media is covering it. I've logged in, I don't know, 80, 90 articles, virtually every media of consequence, including India, Pakistan, the UK, Australia, Canada, the entire English media worldwide have written it up. They gave a briefing to a selected group of national defense journalists that they felt confident would write it straight without any editorializing. Fair enough, and they did. Uh, and then all the other media that weren't there have picked it up or examined the release and written their own. And so there are just 80, 90 articles which are describing the study of Arrow that was put forward, or the Arrow study put forward by the DoD very formally. And that's fine. So that's out there. And if this was 30 or 40 or 50 years ago, most people are going, wow, there's nothing to this, and gone about their business, except it isn't. This is 2024. And the internet is the way things work now. People are not exchanging notes in class. They're not sending letters to each other. They're contacting each other immediately with their irritations. And so what's coming next is the blowback. It's already started. There's going to be lots of it. A lot of the legitimate media that publish the original stories, if they have still got any decent, serious journalistic intent left in these very difficult times, and by that I mean the Washington Post and New York Times, uh, Washington Times, all the major papers, really, certainly the ones that have written up the initial article, then need to come back with their thinking on that. I'd like to see some editorial op-eds. This certainly calls for it. If they really have figured out that the end of the truth embargo is near, what you do is an editorial op-ed. That's not an op-ed by a person like George uh, uh, Wills, George Will, or any other of these editorial writers. This is an op-ed by the editorial staff. They usually go on the left side of the print. Those of you that actually have print papers anymore. And they represent the consensus opinion of the editorial board. This report, which is a disgrace to the DoD, to Lloyd Austin, the Secretary of Defense, and a disgrace to the White House, because the White House, the president is in fact the commander in chief and the boss of the Defense Department and all of the military intelligence community. It's a big deal. And so if the Washington Post, the New York Times, and other major papers were wise and with an eye toward history, they would start writing some editorial consensus op-eds in which they point out that the Arrow report is virtually a lie and an act of disinformation and propaganda from the very first word to the very last. And the only reason that it hasn't set, the world on fire is that only a limited number of people know the history of this issue with some detail. But that number is growing all the time. And those of us that know the history of this issue know that this report is a disgrace and an embarrassment. It's an attempt to do what the US government tried to do in 1969 with a report from Dr. Edward Condon, which was a ruse, it was a con, it was a scam, and it was a lie. It was a disgrace to Dr. Condon. That's all he's ever going to be remembered for, and to the University of Colorado. It's an attempt to do the same thing, only to do it 55 years later. And it is a colossal blunder. It will be seen as such. And as I have said now on numerous media, and I've got another 15 interviews already scheduled, but not CNN or MSNBC, News Nation, or Fox. So, call me, folks. I've been around for a while. I'm happy to talk. I'm very good. I'm going to do what I have done before. This is a disgrace, and the Secretary of Defense has to resign over it. I'm serious. He's a good man, and he's served his country for many, many years. But there's no way that report was issued without Secretary of Defense Austin signing off on it. You don't just call some major press in and give them a report that affects an issue of this magnitude that is well in play and just slip it out the back door. You have to run it by the SecDef. And he signed off on it. And he has to resign because of that. He has a convenient way out. Just slide off the stage. He's got prostate issues and health issues, and step back for a while. Because if he doesn't, I'm not going to be the only one calling for his resignation. And while he may not see this as vulnerable or dangerous as doing something grotesque like putting on your uniform, and that's not actually true. That was a military guy, but walking us into a war that kills hundreds of thousands of people based on lies, literally from the SecDef office. He may not see it that bad. It's something that bad, but in fact, history will see it. History will see it that bad. So that's kind of where we are right now, and it's going to be very interesting. And I've never been more energized than I am now.
Yeah, I don't know what was more disturbing, the Arrow report or the very effective dissemination of the propaganda and the disinformation through the media outlets.
Well, no, they have to cover that. I mean, I'm not faulting them. When the Defense Department puts out calls a briefing and then puts a 65-page report out, you cover it and you recover it, and you proper journalism. This is news. You report what they put out. Then you let the editorial people and the general public decide how good or bad it is. And if it's awful, and as that starts to come out and people are speaking out about that, then you can cover the pushback. That's okay. So let's not jump to conclusions. Let's see.
Okay, but I think that if Leslie Kean was writing that article, she might have written it differently.
Of course, but she wasn't invited.
Right. Yeah.
Neither was Ralph
That's my point.
Right. Now let me tell you, they learn. They learn. For those of you that don't know about this, and anybody who is younger than the age of 65 was no older than 10. I'm sorry. That's another matter. Let me see. Let me go back here. Anybody, 97, it's like 20, yes, 27 years plus 10, 37. Anybody younger than 37 was no older than 10 when this happened, right? So there's a lot of people out there that don't know about this. But in 1997, in order to try to get the issue under control and protect the truth embargo from collapse, the U.S. government, particularly the Department of Defense, took some dramatic measures. They had a rough couple of years. The truth embargo was getting pounded. Boom, bam, boom, right? You had Colonel Corso coming out with his day after Roswell, confirming Roswell and ET presence and even an ET body. You had Stephen Schiff trying to get the Roswell records, and they had to run him around. All right. You had the Rockefeller Initiative going on 93 to 96, where Rockefeller was trying to get Clinton to go get the files, and he actually tried to go get the files. Right. Then you had the Roswell anniversary coming up. Time magazine was projecting about 100,000 people were going to go to the 50th anniversary of Roswell. Roswell was all over the place. And they had commissioned. So they took some dramatic measures to try to deal with these developments between 93 and 97. One of the things they did was spend $12 million of your taxpayer funds under the guide of Secretary of the Air Force Sheila Wignall to do a report called Roswell Case Closed. It cost about 10-12 million bucks, and to show that, of course, it was in fact not an ET craft, but it also wasn't a weather balloon, as they previously said, but it was like a mogul balloon, a much larger program, and that's what people saw, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And they spent a lot of money showing all the truth. Eventually, that was all shown to be lies. by the researchers that were paying attention. But they had put that out, but there wasn't enough. I mean, things were still out of control, and so they held this press conference at the Department of Defense, at the Pentagon, to wrap everything up. And they had, it's 97. They still had high confidence that they could keep this truth embargo going on forever. And so they invited everybody. In other words, all the people with press credentials to the Pentagon briefing office room, whatever, could come. We gonna do something for you. And the room was packed. And so a gentleman by the name of, I think, Colonel Haynes came out on the stage, and he, first of all, spent a lot of time going over the Roswell Case Closed report, reiterating all of the wonderful truths that showed that it was just a mogul balloon. But he didn't stop there, because of, first of all, Corso mentioned seeing a body while he was traveling to Fort Riley, Kansas. Of course, the body issue had been out for years. It's certainly been in the research, but it was getting more traction. And then, of course, you had the Roswell anniversary coming up. And of course, that's part of the deal. Roswell was in crashed vehicles and bodies. I think 3 alive, 3 dead, 1 alive. And so they thought they would address that. And so he starts talking about how people that have been talking about bodies with respect to Roswell were actually mistaking other things that were happening back around that time. They had been testing various equipment and what have you by dropping what they call crash test dummies out of airplanes and then going to see what happens to them when they hit the ground. And apparently that was vaguely in the area of Roswell, somewhere in the desert, what have you. And so that's what they were seeing. Now, not everybody in the room was an idiot. And some of them were actually probably reading about this issue. It was getting a decent amount of press. And somebody raised their hand and said, "Isn't it the case, Colonel, that those crash test dummies were not actually tested until 1952? That would be 5 years after people said they saw and were aware of bodies in 47. And I think somebody else may have mentioned that the crash test dummies were pretty much humans, like almost 6 feet tall, with Air Force type equipment on and things like that. Is that what he's saying?" And at that point, the room erupted into laughter. The video is out there. I've got it, part of it. I've got a piece of it in my file. I want to find the whole thing. I keep saying I'm going to do that. If anybody has got that full video of that press conference, it's pure gold. Keep a copy, but send me a copy, please. But eventually we'll get it. And they were laughing. They were literally laughing because it was absolute crap. I mean, it was just a disgrace to the Department of Defense of the United States of America, the most powerful country in the world with a very substantial nuclear arsenal. They didn't make that mistake this time. They invited a select group of people that were not going to ask any questions of any consequence. The briefing was not filmed, pretty sure, and then they just put the report out. So they're learning. They're basically learning how to continue to make asses of themselves, even deep into the 21st century. That's what they're learning.
How can they get away with this in the era of David Grush, in the era of, I mean, we may have whistleblowers, David Grush's interviewees coming forward this year. How do they think they can continue this cover up or the embargo, the truth embargo? I know you make that, distinction,
Yeah.
in this modern era.
Well, first of all, they can't keep getting away with it, and they haven't. They've done something. It's not over. They haven't gotten away with it yet. Let's see how it goes down. Let's see how the response is. Let's see how they handle the blowback. So they haven't gotten away. I think the question is, why do they keep trying? And there have been various reasons for that over the years. I mean, in the early days of the truth embargo, from 47, certainly into the late 60s, very much national security. I mean, they got away with it because they worked at it very hard. The people were not as knowledgeable, and they were highly motivated because it was very national security grounded. They really did feel that given that the nuclear arms race was well underway, and they knew that it was going to get worse and worse. There was nobody that thought, well, we'll all get, each of us will get like 10 or 20 weapons, and we'll all just say, look, don't use yours, we won't use ours. No, they knew exactly what was going to happen. And it was going to be great. It was going to cost trillions of dollars. Everybody was going to make money, lots of secrecy. The contractors were going to get rich, whatever. So like, but still, it was very much national security based. Now it's a little different. It's much less national security based and more about cover your ass based, right? I can't deal with this yet based. And unfortunately, money based, because the first major pushback against the latest developments leading to disclosure did not come from national security based interests. It came from defense contractors who were absolutely apoplectic about the fact that Chuck Schumer had announced that new legislation was going to be fully extensive, was going to cover the whole disclosure plan process, with subpoena powers and other things that would bring everything out and starting immediately in an orderly way over time. But the people were going to eventually learn everything, which certainly upset the defense contractors. And there are many. But he also included that the government would assert eminent domain, which meant that there was a substantial risk that the billions and billions of dollars they expected to make with patented ET-derived technology or ET-derived scientific concepts after disclosure took place may have just gone up in smoke. And so for the first time ever, the civilian component of the truth embargo had to come out of cover and go on the offensive. It took them about 3 weeks to get their act together. I had no idea. And then suddenly they started leaking out that there was going to be a very substantial effort to gut the powers of that bill. And they went to the right people. They approached exactly the right people in Congress to do it. People who had millions of dollars of defense contractor campaign donations under their belt. And they gutted it. This was greed. And so what happened then is that, okay, they gutted the bill, but they didn't have the guts to eliminate the bill, and they couldn't have. In other words, pull the whole bill out. Like, let's just stop this nonsense, right? You know, the lobbyists would be telling certain members of Congress, look, there's nothing true about it. Don't pay attention. Let's just stop it all. The public doesn't care. There's no interest in the subject anymore. It's all evaporating. No, they couldn't do that. They know they couldn't. So they just took the powers away. Fine. And Chuck Schumer, very shortly after that bill was finally completed, without the powers to be sent to the president, but before it was signed, went into the Senate chamber, as he has done on many occasions, along with Mike Rounds, who helped write that bill. Mike Rounds is on the Senate Armed Services Committee. And he said, we're disappointed that that bill, all the powers were stripped from the bill. We're a little irritated with our Republican friends who led the charge to do that. But we're going to continue to fight for this. We're not done yet. And then he turned the camera off and he left. And this is a standard thing they do. There was nobody else, probably nobody else in the chamber. But because they recorded it in the chamber, it goes into the congressional record. So that's in the congressional record forever. And that is when I think the people that were so pleased with themselves for taking that bill apart realized the mistake they had made. It's like chess. Say you're a typical chess player, not great, but you're getting to play the game. Average player. The average player generally just responds to the move that's just been made. They're looking at the board, there's another move, they look at the board, they decide what to do. And that's okay. But the really good players, they just don't look at the move. They look at the entire set of moves that the other player has made. And they they factored that move into the larger strategy. In other words, they are aware of the overall strategy that the player, their opponent is doing, and they consider that all the time. In other words, they're always maintaining an overview of the strategy of the game. And this is the mistake that the defense contractors made. They just reacted to that move, that latest move, the move by Chuck Schumer, and did not consider all of the moves before that, could stretch all the way back to 1947, but certainly the moves of the last 5 years. And they realized that he had them. He forced them to do something that means they're going to get checkmated. And by that, I mean this. Remember, when you play chess, there's many players, there's many pieces, your opponent has many pieces on the board, right? So they move a piece, you don't just you got to check all the other pieces all the time. And then the strategy, if you're really good. So there's another piece on the board, and that is Mark Warner. They had the power to gut the bill because it had to go through the reconciliation conference to get the final language, and the House was going to be able to have its say. And so it was the House that led the way to take those powers out. That power they had, that ability they had. What they don't have is the ability to stop Mark Warner from bringing 20, 30 witnesses before the House Senate Intel Committee, rather, anytime he wants to. And they know how powerful those witnesses are. They're grushes, lots of grushes, right? And engaging many aspects of the history of this with high credentials, almost all had security clearances, all had taken oaths to serve. They can't stop it. And so they realized, wait a minute, if Mark Warner calls those witnesses, and he could do it tomorrow, and those hearings go on for 4 or 5 days, like a whole week, and 20 witnesses testify about major aspects of this. Plus, they may have other evidence that they've gathered in this last 4 years they could bring out. They could put on one hell of a show. It's over. And the president, at that point, will be in a position to non-politically and appropriately and orderly way come forward and say, based upon the evidence that I have witnessed in this extraordinary hearing, along with you, and by you, he means 20, 100, 200 million people. A lot of people are going to watch that hearing. I can confirm that we're not alone. We've got non-human tech, and you're going to get information about that. And then the day or two after that, Chuck Schumer can reintroduce the UAP Disclosure Act word for word, with everything in it, all the powers and eminent domain. And the Senate will pass it, and the House will have no choice but to pass it, and it's checkmate. Now, the government, when it comes to eminent domain, doesn't mean they will exercise it. It means they're declaring the right. As cities and states have that right. In the interest of the common good, they have the right to declare eminent domain. They have to provide compensation. There's usually a right of appeal. So the government could choose not to declare eminent domain on certain aspects of the ET tech and reengineering and God knows what else they've been doing for 70 years. They may say, fine, you can have those patents, or they could take eminent domain and come back to them and say, okay, in the interest of common good, we do want to proceed in this direction, but we're going to do it in joint venture. And of course, you're going to be able to make quite a bit of money. I mean, there's a lot of ways it could have gone down, but they didn't want to wait for that. And so when the bill does come through and get passed, the sympathies for these defense contractors who have teased us in the past many times, going back years, on more than one occasion, somebody in the defense contractor world dealing with this phenomena have teased us with statements like, oh, we have the tech to take ET home right now. Everything we have is 50 years ahead of anything you can imagine we have, so forth. They tease us. Yeah. Well, what's going to happen, as I say, when the bill goes through the next time, the sympathies for them in terms of their eminent domain crisis and their concerns that all the billions they've made over the last 50 years is not enough. They were counting on billions more by patenting ET tech on one end to the other. The sympathy for that may be substantially reduced. And so they have been checkmated. They just haven't turned their king over yet. And the last move, the move that mates them will be Warner holding that hearing right? At
When
that
will
point,
that
they're
be?
mated. Yeah.
Do you have
What now?
any idea when these whistleblowers are going to come forward?
When they're asked.
Mhm.
There are many that are already in the public domain, and there are many that are talking. I mean, Grush has come forward, Fravor's come forward. And by the way, when I say it's not whistleblowers, it's witnesses. If there's 20 people testifying to the committee down the line, there might be 2 whistleblowers in that group. The rest are just witnesses. So let's be clear about that. But Graves and Fravor and Dietrich and Grush and many others have actually and Kevin Day, and I could go on and on. There are many that we know about, but there are many even more significant ones that we don't know about because they have come forward privately to the Intel Committee or possibly the House Subcommittee or Arrow, because the legislation that's been passed now, there's 4 pieces of legislation have had parts of it that made it easier and more comfortable for them to come forward. And of course, the stigma has gone away. The media coverage is huge. Let me be clear. There are people active and retired who have direct or secondhand knowledge about the engagement of this phenomena by the United States government. Their numbers are in the thousands, thousands. And so the potential number of witnesses is rather large. The vast, vast majority of them have maintained their relationship to the non-disclosure acts and their own decisions to play ball according to the arrangements that were made when they were serving, or while they certainly still are serving. The vast majority have, but their number is shrinking. The number of people within those many thousands that are actually becoming increasingly comfortable to step forward, and it's only growing. And so the truth embargo will fail. The defenders of it will lose. And the only thing that is now in play is how much they're going to disgrace themselves between now and that failure, how much they're going to lose, and what the consequences will be. They still have time to step forward and do this right. They have time to get on board the disclosure train before it leaves the station. I invite them to do so. I am not interested in recriminations. I'm not interested in told you so stuff. I just want to get disclosure done. And those that step forward to help that done are going to, history will serve them well. And those that don't, history will excoriate them well. That's the way it works.
Love it. Love it. And that's one thing that really surprises me so much about the Arrow report is how hard a line they draw with it. They don't even really leave the room open for the possibility of UFOs or,
Oh, this is
anomalous
massive
objects.
desperation.
They
It's
say,
massive. I'm sorry.
yeah,
Go ahead. Go ahead.
yeah. So now that we do have, David Grush and, Lou Elizondo and all this information available to us, they still think they can get away with that. And we have these participants of these programs, these witnesses, as you correctly point out, that are going to come forward. Seemingly, that's unstoppable.
It is.
It's just so strange to me that the Arrow report would draw that hard of a line and not even really leave room open for the possibility of the anomalous in this current era. They're gonna look so bad when these participants do come forward. I don't get that.
Well, Jack, if you study a little history, you'll find that this happens all the time, right?
No,
Governments
absolutely, you're right. But I mean,
governments do
this is a
things.
new era. This is the era of David Grush.
Well, no, it's a new era with respect to the disclosure process. It's not a new era with respect to politics in general or the way countries respond. They're constantly, nations constantly do things which are absolutely inexplicable, don't make sense, and are not in their best interest. They do them usually out of desperation or stupidity. This happened. What can I say? Uh, and this is another example. So it's not, this is important. It's you don't want to view this as like, oh, this is extraordinary. It's not. It's common, which is why we need to deal with this. It's why we need to win this one. Because if we don't start winning some of these situations, they'll continue to do it. It's more likely they'll continue to do it. Acts of desperation coming from pure stupidity. Everybody loses. It's a lose, 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 lose. So that's why we need to understand this is the kind of thing that is typical in happening. And this is one we need to certainly win. And then we need to discuss in the post-disclosure world how we can prevent more of this kind of nonsense, which in this case involves around secrecy reform, abuse of power, endemic institutional lying, and things like that. And those are some areas that need some serious addressing. But right now, forget about it. You can whine about that all day long. You're going to get nowhere. But this is an opportunity to address it, and this is the issue to get in the door with. And then afterwards, I think we can see some substantial reform. But unless we get in the door that I'm talking about is disclosure, capital D, confirmation worldwide. Until we go through that door, you can bat your head against those doors all day long until you're bloody, and they're not going to budge. Outrageous, desperate stupidity on the part of government institutions is the default position, unfortunately. And once in a while, we get something meaningful, constructive. But if there's any self-interest involved or money involved or fear, they go to it every time. So that's how I look at this report. Obviously, I'm worried because as one of the reasons that propaganda works is that no matter how much effort you put into educating people, there's 8 billion of them, by the way, it's a rather large number, how good you are at it, at any given time, the percentage of people that have some what we'll call precise or sophisticated knowledge about any issue, pick one, is small. Now, there's some issues that are broad. There are issues in play politically right now where a vast number, a very significant majority of the American people understand that issue. And they still can't get it resolved. So, and that's why things are getting very heated up, because you've got institutions or people doing things where they're shoving something out when a significant majority of the people know the issue, and they look at that stuff and go, oh, are you kidding me? And that's when things get really tough. And yeah, there's a lot, and that generates heat. The number of people that have an understanding of the history of the UAP issue is still a pretty small number. And so they think still that they can just put out something like this, and not enough people know enough to be able to push back. And so they win. Now, they're not going to win this time, because while the percentage of people that have an understanding of the history of the issue is still obviously not great, what it is, it's not trivial, but it's not great. That percentage, which is still a large number of people, now has a massive global instantaneous communication capability, are wired up already with countless numbers of others through the exponential 6 degrees of separation, with platforms, many different platforms, Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn, TikTok, Instagram, get your WhatsApp, your Signal, Reddit, on and on and on and on and on. And so you don't need a huge majority aware of the issue to take something like that error report and literally wring it, squeeze it, right, until there's nothing there but ash, and then just drop it in the trash can. And that's what's going to happen. This is their miscalculation. This issue is too active on the net. There's too much ability to address it. And so there's already organizations forming using the net to get funding and whatever. There are other areas of activism where the net has exerted enormous power. And ultimately, I believe that the internet, with as many faults as it has and the risks that it raises, will be the key to every single activist success going forward in this world. You're just not going to be able to do it without it. So That's a good thing. Now, obviously, we need to mitigate the awful things the net can do, and emphasize its power for good. Emphasize it's powerful for the common good, which we can do. It's just a matter of how you use it. Give somebody a hammer, they can build a house, or they can take the hammer and become a serial killer. I mean, it's always that way. But that's the miscalculation the defense contractors made. They spit in the face of the Congress, the president, the American people, and the internet. And I'm telling you, of all those, the ones you don't want to spit in the face of is the internet, because it can spit back. And let me tell you, there's a lot of very powerful people and wealthy people over the last 10 years or so that thought they could do that. And their history, they're gone. They're disgraced or in jail, or nobody even cares about them anymore. That's the world we live in.
So your take on Dr. Shankar Patrick is much more generous than my take. What is your read on him?
He was used. Initially, he was asked to be the director of Arrow, which is fine. He had good credentials. I don't know if he had much knowledge of the issue. But Arrow was not set up to discover what this phenomenon is. It wasn't set up to research the evidence and find out if there's ETs here. But that's what they presented it as. That's what the people were being told, essentially. But that's not true. Arrow was set up, and all the other things that took place, in order to prepare for the confirmation of the ET presence, which the government already knows. And it's not complicated. If the world is suddenly going to learn one day that they're not alone, and all that they've been hearing about for the last 77 years is pretty much basically true, the demand on every government, particularly obviously the wealthier and more advanced nations, on the government of those nations, it's going to be enormous. Every journalist, activist is going to be coming for you. I mean, they're going to want to know everything. They want to know right away. They've got a million questions. And so if you've done nothing to prepare for that, you're just going about your business, and then one day, oops, disclosure, it will be very, very disorderly and embarrassing. It's just, you got to prepare. Okay, no big deal. You're going to give the State of the Union address. You prepare big time. You just don't go, oh, is it State of the Union time? Okay, let me cruise on over to the Capitol and give one. So they had to do that, but the dilemma they faced was they could not tell the people, we need to get some legislation passed. We need to set up an organization that's going to be able to deal with this issue in terms of deal with the issue that everybody knows about. We need to, brief some people in Congress and whatever, and we need to do this because there's an extraterrestrial presence. Because the policy of the government, there isn't an extraterrestrial presence. And so, I mean, the president could have done that. The president could come out and say, we need to set up Arrow in order to deal with the extraterrestrial presence. But the position of the government is there isn't one. Wait, what? In other words, the other way to do it would be for the president to say, there's an extraterrestrial presence, and we need to set up Arrow. But that's exactly the problem that I just referred to. It all had to be set up, and it took years to do it. It didn't have to take that long, but the world is in disarray, and craziness going on, and both domestically and foreign. And so it just dragged out. I get it. So he has been hired basically to be the mayor of a Potemkin village, whether or not he knew it. He wasn't hired to really do anything other than hold the fort, show the flag, whatever, until we could get disclosure. And then Arrow would be very busy and get some real funding. Now, even some of the members of Congress didn't get this. I did. I got it immediately. And I've done probably 250 podcasts at least since that was clear. I mean, going back a number of years, I've been saying this for several years. I get it. But I'm the only one that's putting it that way. And that's why it's unfortunate that I'm not able to get on some of these more national programs, because this message is simply not out there. They don't get it. American people need to know that this was not about finding out about the ET presence. The government's known about it since 47, maybe even sooner. It's about preparing for disclosure, which some people want and some don't. And so Kirkpatrick was in that job. Okay, it wasn't a big problem. Whether he understood or not, he wasn't getting a lot of grief, but whoever was going to be the head of Arrow was going to get some trolling on the net. I mean, that's a given. Okay. Uh, so what happened was Grush came forward, and that wasn't supposed to happen. I mean, they didn't count on that. They did not count on a whistleblower at the level of Grush to step out. They knew about him. They knew he was unhappy, but they didn't think he would go that far. And after he made his case to the Intel Committee, made his case to the Intelligence Community Inspector General, got relief, was not upbraided. No, I mean, they knew that what he was telling them was true, and they knew that he was being harassed internally because it was true. But they couldn't give him all the relief. He continued to get death threats, and from those who believe that we should never know the truth about this, ever. And so he went public as a real whistleblower to the debrief and to Ross Coulthard. And boom, that was just huge. He basically confirmed non-human tech, non-human bodies. He confirmed Roswell. He essentially confirms the ET presence, period. That's it. That's what exactly he did. He may have used different terminology. I understand why. And so there is Kirkpatrick sitting over as the head of the All-Domain Anomaly Resolution Office, and a credible person with high clearance has just stated we have ET presence and we've been re-engineering it. And he realizes that the next, several 100,000 journalists are heading his way. What is he going to do? He's in an impossible position. He's been had. I don't think he knew probably the situation. If he did, he didn't think it would go this badly. The people that were putting this up certainly hoped it wouldn't go this way. They thought that this was going to go forward in the way that it's been happening, and it would all work out. But it didn't, because Grush came out. They needed to have taken better care of Major David Grush. They didn't. They slipped up. And so he came out. And so Kirkpatrick's position was untenable. He could have done a lot of things, but in distress, he responded poorly. He attacked Grush immediately, publicly, by sending out a letter, I believe, some court. I forget who he said it to. The point is that he attacked him, trying to push him away. In other words, I'm distancing myself with this person by trying to diminish him so that you won't come and ask me questions about what he just said. That wasn't going to work. And so as things go forward, the whole situation is evolving. He's getting pounded on the internet until he just had enough. And so he resigns. All right. So now he is resigned. Meanwhile, the Schumer UAP Act comes into play, which totally uproots the situation and creates the blowback that resulted in the bill being gutted. The defense contractors are in a panic. Those people within the Department of Defense or within the military intelligence complex in general who oppose disclosure, no matter what, panicked. And they realized that they needed to do something. This thing was getting out of control. And it wasn't out of control because Kirkpatrick resigned. It wasn't out of control because Arrow was set up to be a Potemkin village. It was out of control because Grush advanced the time scale. They weren't ready for that, and they were in a very tough spot. And so they had to take draconian action, and the action apparently they chose. And I don't have firsthand information, and I couldn't get it if I wanted it. But I certainly welcome any and all parties to come forward with detailed explanations of how all of this went down. But until they do, I'm going to suggest this is how it went down. We've got to stop this. we've got to pull another 1969 when they shut everything down. They were clear, and they had 9 good years before Jesse Marcel Sr. was discovered by researchers Bill Moore and Stanton Friedman. And the whole Roswell thing came back to life and has never left the stage since. But we got to give it a shot. And so they decided that a report, essentially, mostly generated by, under the heading, under the control of, or the direction of the unhappy Sean Kirkpatrick, would be put together, released to the public, and go for it. Go for the full close. There's nothing to any of this.
Do you think there's
And
a chance that we will get a better director of Arrow next?
well, we have an interim director. I forget his name. He's keeping a real low profile. Let's just say that under these circumstances, any person in their right mind does not want to become the director of the Advanced Domain Anomaly Resolution Office. They did I get that right? The Advanced
all domain,
Anomaly.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
All Domain Anomaly Resolution Office.
Yeah.
I'm trying to keep up with these acronyms. They'd be crazy to do it. Don't do it. The die has been cast. Arrow is not going to do anything until we get disclosure, but I'm glad it's set up. I'm glad the legislation has been passed. And of course, the briefings and the interaction of Congress is never going to go away. Congress is now on top of this. I assure you, the number of people in Congress that know full well that report's crap is a fairly substantial number. Tim Burchett is already fighting back. The UAP caucus is fighting back. He's probably going to try to have another hearing. Everybody wants to get into a skiff. But the political campaign is underway too. These are all politicians. All the members of the House have to run again. Some of the members of the Intel Committee are running again. Is the issue more important than that? Way more important. But the political campaign underway is unlike anything we've ever seen in the modern era. Certainly in my lifetime, hell, maybe ever. Even the wild and crazy 1800s where some really weird things happen. Members of Congress used to come in there, get mad and start caning each other. Some would have duel, finally had it. They'd have a duel somewhere out in the woods, kill each, whatever. I mean, there was some weird stuff going on back there. But in the context of the modern era, what's happening now is far worse. I mean, the political situation in Washington, D.C., and the Capitol, which is 11 blocks that way, and the White House, which is across the street that way, is off the charts. And so I get it. Trying to make a major move that will change the world forever, and you are the one person that can do it. And that is where Mark Warner, a very good man, a very important man with a tremendous career, if you're him, that's a tough call. I don't know what kind of advice he's getting. Based on Chuck Schumer's statements and what he read into the record, I'm thinking he'd support it. But again, the Senate Intel Committee, well, again, it's Warner's call. Now, there is a website, I say a web page that I've created called shiftstorm.org. SHIFT, shiftstorm.org. And that's been up for months. And anybody that goes there, they can get very simple instructions how they can tag Twitter messages to the key people, in my view, which is Schumer, Warner, Rubio, and Schumer, Warner, and Rubio. Yeah, those three. And they can send in unlimited numbers of tagged Twitter messages to them because they're all on Twitter. And so you write a message and you make sure it has the at Senator Schumer, at Marco Rubio, or whatever their handle is, and fire them off. Change the wording, send in 20 different varieties, whatever. And fill up their notification boxes with these messages, which are being monitored by their staff. How many have been sent? There's no way to know. But keep sending them, folks. So that's shiftstorm.org. It's easy. They get thousands of messages saying, we want that hearing coming in that way. Believe me, it'll get their attention. If you want to send them a letter, fine. If you don't, but don't rain phone calls down. That's a negative. It doesn't help. You can also send them emails. If you have an address in New York that you can put in the email at the form on their site, and you could send all three of these senators emails as well. Anything you can get in the door, except harassing or bothering their office with repeated phone calls. Big mistake. Don't do that. Is great. So do that. Meanwhile, the New Paradigm Institute website, newparadigminstitute.org, which was the set up by the new think tank that is run by and headed by Danny Sheehan and a substantial array of very important people and a growing advisory group. It's gotten some good funding. It's going to get millions more. Feel free to donate. They have set up a simple. It's not a uncommon thing. They have a platform there on the site where anybody can go and very easily send a message to their two senators and their congressperson, and go there and just send them messages that you want the hearing, that you want hearings on the Senate Intel Committee, and why it doesn't matter if they're a congressman from Idaho or anything else. Help build up the sentiment or the awareness in Congress that you're paying attention. You know what's going on. This is that important, and you want this resolved. You want disclosure. Feel free to use it, capital D. So there's two venues, but other groups are doing something similar. I mean, there are a number of groups that have formed in the last 6 months. I can't even keep up with the number of groups. I haven't got the time to organize it all, but I assure you, this movement is on fire. It is moving forward. It is not going to turn around, and we will not stop until the president confirms the extraterrestrial presence. Period. We are never going to stop, and we're going to win, and it's going to be soon. It's not going to be much longer. And so the question is, are you on the winning side or the losing side? The question comes down now for anybody with the Pentagon or in the military, or the CIA or members of Congress. Are you going to be on the right side of history, or disgrace yourself into service in service to a program that is 40 years past its shelf life?
Bold words. I love it. I love it. You're rocking it. You're moving things forward. You're kicking ass. Yeah. Nice. Okay, let me take it in a different direction. All right, let's get a little weird. Timothy Gallaudet, I'm probably mispronouncing his name, has said
Admiral Gallaudet. Yes.
Yeah. How do you say it?
I believe it's Gallaudet, but
Gallaudet.
only he can confirm that.
He has said we are in touch with the beings.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think he meant by that?
We're in touch with the beings.
How deep does the rabbit hole go?
Again, I don't know. Now, first of all, I need to review his exact statements. By the way, he's a good man. He's a great man, and he is one of the few that have got the courage to come forward. But he's not the only one. Edgar Mitchell said many times there's an extraterrestrial presence. Robert Bigelow, a billionaire with a major contract with NASA, came forward and said there's an extraterrestrial presence. Tim Burchett says there's an extraterrestrial presence, and many others. And the Admiral is another one. Now, I need to review the statement. I haven't checked it, and I will. Let me say that statement is too vague. If that's what he said, it's still a little vague.
It was very vague. It was just we are in contact with them. It was very, very vague.
Again, what does that mean? We had a live ET from the Roswell crash. That's contact with extraterrestrials, or with an extraterrestrial, isn't it? Is there some communication going on? Is there been any formal arrangements, things like that? I mean, this is important. And so, but I will review what the Admiral said. And if it implies, or not implies, if he is referring to any kind of formal interactions with ETs by government. I mean, there are contactees in government. There are people at the DOD, people in the Air Force that are contactees, just like regular people are. I mean, there's a lot of contactees in this world. How many? I don't know. I think it's in the millions. And I think some of these contactees in government with clearance are known to government and probably been talking with them, meaning they're probably treated very well, by the way. If you're a contactee and you have clearances and you are essentially part of the classified world, you're gold to the government because they can talk to you and they can learn what this engagement is like and what's going on, and be quite comfortable that it's not going to go forward. They can't do that with civilians. And so there are those. But at some point, I'm probably going to have to directly speak with the admiral and try to get clarity on this, because I have always taken a somewhat what's the word, nuanced position on this. I've always said it's possible, that I have not seen evidence that clearly confirms it. And it's a very significant component of this issue. Formal contact with ETs by our government at any time is a very significant thing. And it will undoubtedly come out in disclosure, after disclosure. It will be one of the earliest questions asked. And they're going to have to probably tell the truth. If they don't, that would be a huge mistake. Coming forward after disclosure and putting out more lies would be a big mistake. And I'm happy to advise anybody that's thinking about doing it and telling them why don't do this. Right. It would be like doing a kamikaze charge into a machine gun nest with no weapons at all, just running at the machine gun. It would be a very big mistake. So this is a non-trivial thing. Look, and I will also say this, it is one of a number of issues that would motivate people inside to say, no disclosure now, no disclosure now, wait for me to retire. I'll be in Boca playing golf. Nobody's going to bother me. I get it. There are a number of issues like that. One of them is contact. I assure you, contact is not on the table in terms of the interactions with Congress and so forth. I mean, they know about it, I'm sure, but they're not trying to get arrow set up and everything else by talking about contact. This is a tough one. Post-disclosure, contact is going to be a very tough issue to deal with, but that's too bad. It's the reality. But they're not going to be able to deal with it until we get disclosures. Don't let's make the disclosure process harder than it is. And the issue of formal engagements with ETs by government is a very tough issue they're going to have to deal with post-disclosure. Is it necessary to go there to get disclosure? No. Is it worth acknowledging that they're facing this and show some appreciation for the dilemma they have? Yeah, that's okay. Is it a reason why a lot of people inside government might go, let's throw a Hail Mary here, let's put out this dumbass report, because we're going to have to answer about contact. We're going to have to talk about the treaty we made or whatever the hell. Yeah, I can see it. But again, Hail Marys only work about 10, 11% of the time. The simple truth is this. If you work in the government, you're elected to Congress, if you're serving in the military, you are serving and you are paid by taxpayers. And if you're bothered by the fact that sometimes really difficult things have to be dealt with, then retire and go do something else. It's that simple. Making up excuses why you can't afford or can't handle it, it doesn't cut it. You either can do this or not. And if you can't resign, quit. I know it may be a problem for your family. You need that income, but you are designed to serve us, not treat us like children, not run us around in circles or come up with all the reasons why something can't happen now simply because it makes you uncomfortable. If you haven't got the ability to deal with it, then just leave the stage, please.
That'd be nice. What do you make of the Michael Herrera information, or have you studied that at all, or do you want to go there? It's it's definitely an alarming piece of information.
Give me.
Yeah,
I mean, I'm dealing with a fire hose now.
Sure, yeah, sure. Well, you probably
Tell me about it. Let me see what I think.
Comment on it, but he was in the Marines. He was in Indonesia, and they I think it was part of a relief effort. And there was a seemingly man-made and man-operated UFO or ARV, whatever you want to call it. And when they came across it, their unit was surrounded and had guns pointed at them and threatened. Anyway, it's a longer, more involved story, and it gets into
I recall it. I recall
it.
it.
Yeah. What's your take on that?
Well, it's one of thousands of stories. It's one of thousands of stories. It ultimately, it doesn't matter whether we resolve that or not. The ET presence has been proven completely. And so the issue is getting to a place where we can start looking at these things and resolving them. Until we get to get disclosure, we're just guessing and going around in circles, and it's not going to go anywhere. The government has thrived on the fact that under the truth embargo, the people, to their great credit, decided we'll prove this, we'll study this, we'll write the books, we'll do the docs, we'll interview the people, we'll form the organizations, we'll do all of this with very little money. We'll make enormous sacrifices. And the government said, great, that's fine, go ahead. Do all the research you want. Go to the archives, every day. Right? Form groups, have fun. Just don't challenge our truth embargo policy. Okay, I get that. And we have, that's been the circumstance now for these 7 decades, but no longer. We're not going to play that game anymore. So people are going to come forward, more sightings, more cases, more people are coming forward, but it would be nice to know the truth about any of it and all of it. History will want to know about all of it, I assure you, but I don't need to know about it. I don't need to prove it. I don't mind getting these reports. They send me things, but I come back and I say, I'm not a researcher, I'm an activist. The simple truth is, until we get disclosure, we really can't resolve any of these things to find out what's true, what's not, what's important, what's not. And so we have to stop playing that game. The Arrow report is a trap. It's a giant piece of bait on a hook they threw out there. It's not just, an effort to make things go away, but they're not stupid. They are dying for the entire UAP research activist content creating community to now set its sights or gear up to try to disprove every lie in that report. Take all the time you want. Take years, take decades. It's okay. It's a trap. Don't even think about it. Don't bite. Don't take that bait. Just drop the damn thing in the trash and start pushing to get that hearing before the Senate Intel Committee.
Love it. Love it. I love your single-minded pursuit of disclosure. That is awesome. And you seem to feel like it's imminent.
It's been, further and closer away. It's like the doomsday clock, right? They've been monitoring that clock and clock and been putting out press releases on it since 1947. Sometimes we're closer to nuclear war. Sometimes we're a little further away. It depends on the circumstances. But we haven't had nuclear war yet. And that's the same for disclosure. Sometimes we've been closer. Sometimes we've been further away. We haven't had disclosure yet. But I'll tell you something right now. Right now, it's not unreasonable to say that as close as we are to disclosure, thank God, again, we are just about as close to nuclear war. It's neck and neck. Looking for one of those, what do they call them? Photo finishes. Literally. Nuclear war is just literally hanging in the air right now. If you pay attention, and I'm not trying to scare people, I talk about this all the time because I'm pretty familiar with it. The risk of nuclear war has never been higher. And I talk about it. And the reason I talk about it is because I happen to believe disclosure is the way out. That disclosure and what takes place afterwards is going to open the doors we can go through to finally stop this madness before it actually happens. So that's why I have to talk about it. And so I get emails a lot about how I am this ridiculous optimist, right? I'm an uber optimist. Okay. However, I also get emails about how I'm a scaremonger. So for some people, I'm a scaremonger. For other people, I'm an uber optimist. Actually, I think what I am is I'm a optimist monger. So if anybody wants to insult me now, that's use that. At Bassett, he's an optimist monger. I'm telling you. He's always trying to be optimistic, and he's scaring the hell out of us at the same time. It's very strange, right? That will work.
I love it. I love it. Okay, so what are the next steps? What's next? Are we going to get field hearings? Are we going to get Warner bringing people forward? Are we going to get the House? What's going on? What do you see as the next step toward disclosure?
Next step. Well, steps. Steps. What are the steps? One, in other words, it's a walk and chew gum thing. I think the UAP caucus needs to continue to make noise and add more members. Tim Burchett, do it. That's one thing. Hey, if anybody wants to start a UAP caucus in the Senate, UAP caucus, go for it. Start tomorrow. That's fine. It's good stuff. We need to rain down tag tweets, emails, letters to the three key people, Rubio, Warner, and Schumer, and to all the members of Congress, that we want that hearing now. We want it now. Okay, do that. We need the many journalists in the professional journalistic world that have written about this issue in, I think, a sober way, a reasonable way. Need to write some pushback. We need op-ed articles, or we need opinion articles. The highest level, the better. Basically pointing out the flaws in that. No, that flaw is too generous in that Arrow report. That would be very helpful, and we're going to get that, I assure you. We need support for the service entities that are engaging this issue, which are growing. There are many. I can't name them all. Support MUFON. MUFON is stepped up and has become the MUFON of the 21st century. It's hired a substantial lobbying firm. It's on the Hill. It's creating media, MUFON TV, and other stuff. It's becoming more sophisticated. Its memberships are growing. This is at the leadership of Dave McDonald, and also Ron James, who is their media director, a jack of all trades. I mean, he's doing all kinds of stuff. MUFON is ready for the post-disclosure world. Join it now. Sign up now. That's one thing. Go to New Paradigm Institute. Go to the donate page. Donate. If you know somebody out there that's got, well, a lot of resources, who supports those who serve, let them know. Send them in the direction of New Paradigm Institute. Gary Nolan, the Nobel Prize nominee, has set up a scientific think tank called Soul Foundation. Check it out. Donate to that. Same thing. You know somebody that's incredibly wealthy and supports people who serve, pass it on. Paradigm Research Group will be a nonprofit soon. I'm about to file in the next few days, actually, and I'll be able to take, for the first time in 28 years, tax-deductible donations. It's time to go there. I'm going to go there, and it'll be a think tank. So go to paradigmresearchgroup.org. Now, put it this way. I've taken the contribution page down there, the donation page down there, because I didn't want people donating money and then I become a think tank later, and you can't grandfather them in. So it's okay. But soon I will have that back up, and you could support Paradigm Research Group, which is going to be, a smaller player, but I'm light on my feet. But I'm also officed in one block from the White House in the National Press Building. So I could be helpful post-disclosure. So that's another way we need people to fund. We need the people that have been sitting on the sideline that know this is true, with all kinds of resources, and they choose to go here and they go there. It's time for them to start looking at this issue. Not that the other issues are important. There are so many, and they all need money. This is pretty important too, and could affect all the others. Most issues that you would address are important and significant but they're pretty much defined by that issue. So like you get the help, you do something there, and something comes from it. That's the way most issues are. Disclosure is totally different. Disclosure as an issue, if it succeeds, if the support comes in and makes it succeed, it will impact just about every other issue out there, every other need for reform or whatever out there in one way or another. I mean, it is the omnibus issue. It's a massive octopus that one way or another can touch all of these others. And so you actually could be helping out scores and scores of other areas of concern by getting the disclosure thing done. It's kind of a little. There's others kind of like the anti-nuke issue, or the nuclear non-proliferation issue is kind of like that. If you can prevent a nuclear war, that benefits everything else. It benefits everything else. In other words, if we have a nuclear war, all these other issues don't matter. It's irrelevant. You know, you just take everything you learn from watching 200 or 300 episodes of The Walking Dead, and you try to survive in the post-apocalyptic world. So, but fact is, there's very little funding for the nuclear non-proliferation effort, or the anti-war effort in general. That's become, I think some people just given up. It's like that. There's no amount of money that's going to solve this. This is a worldview problem, not a money problem. Disclosure is also a worldview problem, but it's much more doable. Getting rid of the nukes is going to be hard. Getting disclosure is just convincing Mark Warner to hold a hearing. I mean, so like, again, so that's some steps that can be taken. Sign up on social media, but focus. So in other words, you go on Twitter, focus on this issue. How can you do that? Tagging. UFO Twitter is the tag most commonly used by the people in this field. So if you tag UFO Twitter, when you go up, you'll start getting feedback from that. And then who you choose to follow. So you can join Twitter and you can follow people in a particular area, and that's what you're going to get back. Right? If you take care. It's the same thing with most of the other, I think, to some degree. I don't fully understand these other. TikTok and Instagram are just not something I'm on. I need to think about that. But in general, if you go on social media, then focus on the issues that matter and go there, and that's what you'll get back. LinkedIn is probably the most responsible and positive, optimistic social media there is. It's remarkable how, and I've got, I don't know, I'm up there, 8, 9, 10,000. And the feed that comes back, the stuff that comes back, LinkedIn is remarkably upbeat, positive, beyond anything else the social media is. And why that is, I'm not sure. Probably all about algorithms or something. But LinkedIn, there are plenty of people on LinkedIn that are interested in this issue, and they're following me, and I'm following them. So there's that. These are, again, the kinds of steps that are. I mention them because every one of them is doable now. You could start on each one of them right now. You don't have to go to a big elaborate thing. But at the same time, there are people that are acting right now to set up more think tanks, set up more entities engaging the issue, hooked to the issue in one way or another. People that are engaging other aspects, like the consciousness aspects of that. That's getting a lot of attention now. Groups are forming. And they're going to do that. And then that's in spite of how things are going. How many awful reports get released. The internet is building the structure of the post-disclosure world as we speak. It's not much brick and mortar there. Doesn't need to be, but there is some brick and mortar. I'm in a very nice piece of brick and mortar. Danny Sheehan's office in DC is in a very nice piece of brick and mortar right across from the Senate building. And there'll be more of that. But the internet is going to be where the reforms are ultimately going to come, and where the world is going to engage these issues in a way unseen. And if we can eliminate some of the worst of the internet, which is affecting people's lives badly, creating problems, certainly the poorly regulated propaganda by heavy paid, well paid and government based hacking groups and all that kind of stuff. Though hacking is not just about the internet, hacking is a global problem. But there isn't a tool that's ever come along in the history of the human evolution that had both a dark and a white side. I mean, it's just the way it is. It's never going to be otherwise. So you either choose to use it for good or you use it for ill. And I, obviously choose good. Use these tools and use it for good. So there's a lot of things that could be done, Jack. And of course, will do another 1,000 podcasts because that's what I do. I'll never have
You're
to
a
worry
machine.
about nothing to do.
I love it. Okay, now you mentioned, I don't know if you want to go there, and it's cool if you don't. But you did mention the consciousness aspect of the phenomenon.
Sure.
Is that something you would like to speak to?
Well, just let people know I'm aware of it. And I've been to umpteen conscious life expos. Consciousness is its own area, and always has been, and it's in its approach in many different ways. Obviously, it's a big deal. The human brain and what we call the conscious sentience of the human brain is one of the most significant things in the world that we know of, and it's extremely difficult to understand. It's we're understanding how various phenomena in the galaxy work 12 billion years into the past, right? We can go 12 billion years in the past. Oh yeah, that's what's going on there. But when it comes to consciousness, we are struggling still. And that's interesting. There's two things that are coming up of late that I can speak to very briefly. One is that the ET presence within government has stimulated consciousness engagement, using the general term. Why? Because the government knew early on the ETs were telepathic. And just telepathy alone, which was being studied at a couple of universities till they shut it down. Princeton, Duke, yeah, we can't have that going on. But inside the government, oh yeah, and the USAP program studying it, probably still are studying it. The fact that ETs are telepathic is non-trivial. Why? Because they are able to put messages in another brain and take messages or receive messages through another brain through some sort of method at a distance. How? Really? How? We don't know. But we know it's done. Therefore, trying to understand how that happens immediately takes you into consciousness. And so that is triggered their interest. And then as they dabbled or started looking at this, they stumbled across remote viewing. Remote viewing is even more sophisticated in a way than mind-to-mind communication. It's projecting the mind somehow in a way that you are able to see things at a distance. I absolutely believe it's possible. I've heard enough and seen enough to know that it's almost certainly true. I'll leave a 1% possibility that it's just a misunderstanding, but I think it's true. So, whoa, they went there. Now, of course, they kept that from us, right? Because we can't handle that. I mean, there's one of the list of things we can't handle, don't have a need to know. And so that certainly is saying that the brain is working in ways that are incredibly sophisticated and interesting. And then there's the rest of what the brain can do, which we know it can do a lot of things. And generally those things that the brain can do that are not in the standard menu, we shove that under consciousness. Okay, I get it. But the most interesting thing about consciousness, probably right now, that's emerging, is that the approach to it centered around quantum theory is starting to get traction and coalesce. And it's looking like the explanation for consciousness that has always eluded us is because it's operating at the quantum level. And that's a hard level to get to. All right, trust me. There isn't a microscope that will take you there. it is operating at the quantum level. And the quantum level is about probability waves and so forth. And boy, you're getting into pretty interesting stuff that obviously there's more that's going to be learned about that. But if it's operating at the quantum level, that one explains why it's completely eluded us. And two, gets to be really fascinating. And it also takes us to a place that allows us to possibly explain other things, such as telepathy, such as remote viewing, and so forth. And the rough idea about that, and this is rough, right, is that the brain is able to engage what I think the researcher Bohm called the implicate order, which is this sort of ground state field, which might just be where the probability waves that literally make up everything, one way or another, are operating. And in that level, things get pretty bizarre. For instance, the idea of non-locality, where two particles separated by light years can literally respond instantaneously to something or change, adjust instantaneous. How is that possible? Well, we think of it, well, through space, right? Space as we know it. But what if everything some way is connected to this implicate order? And if you're talking about a particle, its connection is almost direct, as opposed to the human brain, which would be a little more indirect. And so the reason it's instantaneous at the quantum level, at the implicate order level, time as we know it does not apply. And things are instantaneous. Boom. Whoa. So that's one thing that comes out. And then there's other things. And all I can say is the last thing I read on quantum mechanics was about, I think the title of the article is "Nothing Exists." Everything you think that exists is not there. And you start reading it and you're right, they may be right. Right? And so it's like, it's very scary. You're like, well, none of this is real. And so you get up in the morning, let me get this out of here. Hang on. You get up in the morning and any sense that everything that's happening is really not real is not motivational. I mean, it's not something, well, why not go back to bed? What's the point? And really, I was feeling that way. And I'm thinking, what is the point? So quantum mechanics is treacherous. Go there at your own risk, right? Fortunately, most people are not going to go there. And so they're going to enjoy life. They're going to do their thing. They're going to have fun. But I'm one that, fortunately, I'm just not smart enough, nor do I have enough understanding of physics anymore to really get into serious trouble. But I do follow some threads and so forth that people that are in serious trouble. And what can I say? Ultimately, for those that are science averse, and their numbers are large right now, it really comes down to this. Whatever is the explanation for existence, that is fine. There is an explanation for existence. But existence includes sentient beings like us having fun and doing stand-up and stuff. That's part of existence, right? So enjoy the part that you're involved with and don't worry so much about the ultimate explanation for it. Because in the end, it really is not going to probably matter in terms of your presence. But the very fact, there are people right now. Oh, I'm going to riff. I'm loving this. There are people right now in our country, citizens of the United States, but the whole the world, but people right now in the citizens of the United States who may or may not have multiple degrees from advanced universities, but are also very smart. And on their own, they're doing a little autodidactic DIY in which they are studying and coming to understand quantum physics and things like that. And the government's position is that they can't handle the truth of an ET presence. Really? You can't handle that. Actually, their position is maybe you can handle it, but in order to tell you, we have to tell everybody, and they can't handle it. Ultimately, this is a fundamental, um, what's the word? A fundamental disregard and dissing of the power of the human brain in anybody's head. Everybody on this planet has a brain, and that brain, even if you're not rocking it on the SAT scores or your vocabulary is not as big as somebody else, that's mostly environmental. But that brain is unbelievable what he can do. But he can't do and react to things that it doesn't even know exist or is kept from it. And so the fundamental concept of you can't handle the truth is a fraud. Everybody on this planet has tremendous abilities available to them because, assuming they have a standard brain that hasn't been profoundly damaged by, I don't know, too much martial arts or, not wearing your seatbelt. It's extraordinary. And so that you can't handle the truth, you don't have a need to know, is an absolute fraud. It is an arrogance held by a select group that think they're special, and you're not. And the sooner we make that clear and put them in their place so they stop doing that, the better off everybody will be.
Yeah, it's interesting how they think they are able to handle the truth, but it would somehow devastate the rest of us.
Yeah.
Yeah, it would cause mass chaos and upset to society and destroy civilization if the truth got out. But somehow they're not running amok.
No, they're handling it quite well. And they've got free underground parking, decent salaries, retirement plans, uh, they're able to operate in very classified arenas in many cases, not being bothered by the press. They got it made. So, yeah, I can handle it. Life is good.
Life is on easy street when you're in the well, as Richard Dolan calls it, the breakaway civilization or the truth embargo. Well, yeah, whatever. It's interesting that you draw that distinction. Ross Coulthart, he will go after the criminality of the cover up, but you make a very conscious decision not to go after the criminality, to kind of be more inclusive, saying these guys may be the gatekeepers of this knowledge, but it's probably not a good idea to alienate them with this criminality stuff. At least that's kind of my read on what you're
Well,
I want you to put it in your own words.
the truth embargo is to replace UFO cover up, which essentially criminalizes everybody connected to it, right? There are people involved in the quote truth embargo that don't sit around telling themselves how incredible they are and how they can handle the truth and nobody else can. They don't think like that. They're just doing their work. Uh, there are decisions that have been made at much higher levels where people with that attitude have been influential. And so, but even then, right? Again, particularly because of the national security implications, we have to get disclosure. That is far more important than getting retributions or disgracing somebody personally, by and large. And I say that carefully because I am calling for the resignation of Lloyd Austin. But the reason I'm calling for it is because in the context of the moment and this report, it is a way to send a very clear message out there that we need disclosure right away. But there are a lot of situations where you want to talk about how awful somebody was or what have you, but it doesn't really serve the disclosure process. A limited use of this. I'm not criminalizing Kirkpatrick. You can see that. And he's not a criminal, but he made a mistake. And I'm not really criminalizing Lloyd. I'm not saying that what he did was illegal. I'm simply saying it was a disgrace to do that report. And because of the context and importance of it, you probably should resign. Actually, you should resign. So I'm trying to stay pretty much in an area that is minimally negative, mostly positive, and keep the focus on disclosure. Every activist movement is about injustices of one type or another, bad actors, bad policies, and so forth, always. And you want to fix it. All right. So fix it. And then after that's out of the way, you can then decide to what extent you want to hold people accountable. I'm going to completely support amnesty and truth and reconciliation post-disclosure, so you know where I'm at, right? That's straightforward. In other words, everybody gets off one way or another. Again, to really get off completely, to not have
I
any
think we would
blowback.
get disclosure a lot faster if we did offer amnesty. Yeah.
Well, yeah, but amnesty, offering it. I mean, we have offered it. I've talked about it. I've brought it up, and a lot of other people have, but that doesn't give them amnesty. In order to get amnesty, the law has to be passed. And we're not going to get an amnesty law prior to disclosure. We should show our sympathies for it, and I do, and support the idea. But that law won't get passed until after disclosure. And then, of course, we can really push for it. And the same thing for truth and reconciliation. Now, there are people that have done things which are, in fact, illegal. The overall policy of truth embargo is not, but certain illegal acts have done. Some of them may be very bad. And if they are not willing to accept truth and reconciliation, if we establish that program, it's possible they may be held accountable. And they may suffer, because there are people out there that are going to look for that and pursue that. And if that happens, it happens. But it's not. It should not be the focus of the disclosure process. It's a post-disclosure matter, and some people have done bad things. They'll just get away with it in a sense. I mean, nothing will happen, and they'll lead their lives. But there's been a lot of research done, and some things may come out. In which case, truth and reconciliation for the worst. I assure you that the truth and reconciliation that helped resolve the post-apartheid world of South Africa, the things that were done, nothing done in support of the truth embargo remotely approaches the degree of awfulness that was serviced by the truth and reconciliation after apartheid was eliminated. So I don't get too worked up about it, but I deeply support it.
Okay, what do you think about David Grush potentially becoming a congressional aide?
There's a rumor going around that he might be consulting with or supporting the caucus, I think.
Some
So
sort of
that's not a
staffer.
congressional aide.
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah.
he can do whatever he wants. If I were him, would I become a staff member of a member of Congress? No, I wouldn't.
Well,
Because
there's the idea that if he does this, it'll allow him to get his security clearances back, which
he can
I
get
don't
his
know if that
security
would enable
clearances
him.
back. I'm not sure that he'd lost his. Has he lost his security clearance? Maybe he has.
I have heard debate on that forever. So
Yeah, I don't
honestly,
know. Look, if he hasn't got, he doesn't have to. The DOD can give his security clearance back anytime it wants. You don't have to play games with this. Uh, so that's much more important is David Grush is going to decide how to go forward. I mean, he's still getting death threats, so it's not ultimately the doors available to him will really open after disclosure. But if I were him, would I hire on as on a staffer of a member of Congress? No, because at that point you're now that member of Congress is now your employer, and so you're serving that member of Congress. David Grush needs to get in a position where he can serve the American people. Run for Congress, right? That would be, I could see that. Be a consultant to be a consultant to say a cabinet level, right? Consultant, not an employee. In other words, he doesn't want to get in a position where he is answering to an employer in a kind of a direct way, because the issue that he engaged and what he is now known for, it transcends almost all of that. It transcends politics and so forth. And so he'll probably start his own company, wouldn't surprise me. But he needs, to the extent possible, to be available to and able to speak to this issue independent of any third party force or bias. But ultimately needs to do what serves himself and his family's future. So whatever he does, I'm totally behind that. I mean, I'm totally supportive of David Grush. I've already stated publicly that he should get the Presidential Medal of Freedom. He won't get that until after disclosure, but if he does, I will be calling for it. There's a couple of people that deserve the Presidential Medal of Freedom, in my view. I mention it from time to time. I don't want to beat it to death. After disclosure, I'll probably be much more active in that regard. I'll just kind of decide who I think deserves it and start promoting them. That's how you get it, by the way. You got to promote it. Hopefully others will promote it for you. And you don't want to promote yourself, but other people promote it. That's how it happens. The government just doesn't sit around going, oh, that person's really special. Let's go give. No. It's somewhat political. But it's important because getting the Presidential Medal of Freedom to people involved in an issue gives that issue the acknowledgement it needs. And giving that Presidential Medal of Freedom to somebody who is in an issue that is destructive, even venal, gives that destruction and venality extra gravitas. So it's a non-trivial thing. But David should be at the first of the list.
I love it.
I hope risks that all they should take. Yes, go ahead.
No. To finish your thought.
No, he should be the first of the list. Particularly the timing. But some of the nuclear tests, I mean, I could see Bob Salas certainly on that list. Almost no one has put more time and effort as a witness, a whistleblower, into trying to get Congress involved in this than him. And they wouldn't. They utterly. I mean, he's had of 30-some years. Grush was brought into the UAP task force. Didn't go well. Year goes by. He goes to the Intel committee. Next thing you know, he's coming out. He's a whistleblower. And he's world famous. 2 years. Bob Salas has been trying to push this issue forward for 35 years. As the leader of the what I call the nuclear weapons tampering witnesses, and so he would be on that list. Yes.
Okay, so what is the interest that the ETs or the beings have in our nukes? There's a report of a similar incident to the Robert Salas incident, and there's been a couple others from the U.S., but there's been one in the Soviet Union where they actually triggered a launch and stopped it at the last minute. And then in the Salas case, they were disabling the nukes. So what's going on? What's your take on all that?
Well, when all the information comes out, we're going to find that a number of missile sites were compromised, meaning shut down in both the Soviet Union and the United States, more than we know. And that at least once in the U.S. and in the Soviet Union, they turned on the launch process, which is far scarier, I can tell you.
My hair turned white just thinking about it.
Yeah. And the consensus of the witnesses that I've talked to, and I think almost the logical, the obvious logical interpretation, it's a warning. Don't do this, right? Get rid of these. Now, it's not without support because, and there's a gentleman, it's interesting, there's a gentleman that just died, wonderful man. His name was John Ross. I can actually hang on a second. I've started this, so I gotta finish it. Let me just quickly go to my website. Just take a second. On my website, since I'm doing this, under paradigmresearchgroup.org, under projects, more, I have a project called In Memoriam, where I have been listing and linking to background info about the people that we have lost over the years. It's quite extensive now. John Yost did 2 documentaries, but the last one was the most important one. It was a documentary about his contact. He had not been involved in this issue, but he had contact, and he finally wanted to tell a story, and he told it in a documentary called, I think, Abduction something. Oh God, I'm so sorry. Let me just go here. Click on that. That link is not working. Oh, I know why. I have to fix that. Anyway, the abductions, the evidence, or something like that.
John.
And one of the things he did was some research that I hadn't seen, but now I'm aware of. He was researching schoolyard
Alien abductions answers.
Alien abductions answers. Thank you. And then I got to fix that link. He was researching schoolyard events. I know a lot of people are going, schoolyard events? There are two that are very well known. One is the Ruah event, initially investigated by John Mack, and the other is the Westfall event in California. I mean, California. The Westfall event in Australia. The Ruah event was in Zimbabwe. And what is notable is that both of these events are very similar. A craft, not a hologram, not a plasma ball, but a craft landed near a schoolyard. And ETs got out of the craft. And not surprisingly, the kids were drawn to this. They didn't need to be coached. And what ensued was messages, telepathic messages were being projected in these kids' minds about future destruction, which could have been interpreted as the aftermath of nuclear events, could have been environmental destruction, and it affected them deeply. And these cases have been proven beyond any reasonable doubt. Turns out that's happened more than twice. There have been a number of these, and that work needs to be expanded. We need to have every schoolyard case get the same treatment that Ruah and Westfall. But of course, time has passed, and so it's going to be tough. But just some information about them would be helpful. Now, but it's more than just that. There have been millions of contact events between ETs and humans on a private basis. The number of contact reports that are already in hand, either by emails or letters or what have you, is in the hundreds and hundreds of thousands. And they've been read. Many have turned up in various books. Usually a book might have 10 or 12 cases in it. But one of the things that is clearly happening is that when in the presence of ETs, the ETs are projecting images into the brain of the contactee, or maybe showing them what amounts to, a screen and that you're watching it, but it's almost certainly it's not a television, that they're projecting it one way about this destructive future, post-apocalyptic images that in many cases are interpreted as post-nuclear war. Okay. You don't have to be a rocket scientist to get this, right? They are concerned we're going to have a nuclear war or destroy the environment to the point where it's not livable. But let's just focus on the nuclear war. And so they're putting these images in people's head and turning our missiles off. Pretty obvious, isn't it? So one of the agendas, probably the most important agenda involved in what we've been experiencing and learning about, involves the nukes and their concern about those nukes. And that is a big deal. And it is a very difficult post-disclosure issue, but it will be dealt with immediately. In fact, it'll be dealt with, it's going to come up in the Senate Intel hearing. Fortunately, there's still enough people alive that there are more than enough that will be happy to sit in front of the Intel Committee, take an oath, and talk about the events that they were privy to. The security guys up top were firsthand witnesses to the craft over the ICBM site. And then you've got the missile officers down below who were obviously aware that the missiles were turned off. The security guys were always reluctant to come forward. They were younger, they weren't officers, and it was not something they wanted to do, but I imagine some of them will come forward now. They're still younger than the SAC base officers. We've lost a number of those to death. Of course, that's exactly what the government wanted. They wanted them all to die, so they never have to deal with them, and they never did deal with them. They pretended they didn't exist. An irritating thing. Criminal? No. Worth reminding? Yes. So that's what I believe. And I can do 2 hours on that. The point is that disclosure, the risk of nuclear war, the presence of nukes, the fact that we use 2 of them on our own species. It's easy to forget. I mean, very upset about what's going on in the Middle East right now. We vaporized or killed in the most horrible of ways. I mean, look, the people that were killed instantly got, they were lucky. The people that died. I never hesitate to mention that there is a very profound connection between the beginning of the nuclear era, certainly the first use of nuclear bombs in 45, the nuclear arms race, the presence of ETs, and the ET actions that they have taken. It's extremely significant. And I believe that my best projection on that is this, that the degree that extraterrestrials have been supporting the disclosure process, and they have, believe me, that so many things that they do that is helping disclosure take place, not keeping the truth embargo. And obviously, if they simply manifested themselves en masse, that would end the truth embargo. But they don't do that. On the other hand, they do plenty to help advance the process of disclosure and public engagement. And so what that means is they want disclosure, but there's a protocol here. They have a way that it's to be done. I get that. It needs to come from us. It needs to be official by us to ourselves. Right, fine. So that's the other thing I take away from this. And the second thing I take away from this is that you don't go through all of this just to get somebody to acknowledge you're there and then what, leave? Or just continue with business as usual, such as the contact and abduction events, after the world has now informed itself that there's ETs here and all the contactees are validated. So my projection is we're going to get disclosure. They've helped it happen. After disclosure, it's very possible all abduction type events will stop. And then as soon as we've gotten what we'll call sort of up to speed as a species on the truth of this, since obviously there's plenty to learn, that open contact will follow. That could be a year, could be 6 months, could be a year, could be 2 years. I can't imagine more than 2 years. Open contact will be anticlimactic. How it will take place is irrelevant by and large, as long as it's happening and we are informed of what's going on. And the number one item on the table, when we have open, essentially publicly disclosed, don't know about past deals or treaties, will be the nukes. Number one, the nukes. And I think the ETs are going to say, you got to get rid of them. And we're going to say why. And they're going to tell us why. And we're going to decide whether to do that or not. And by rid of them, all of them, I mean, not one nation, all probably the number one decision we'll have to make post-disclosure. And there will be other things, of course, but that's my call. That's my call. And it's not based upon a wild speculation built on nothing. It's 28 years of playing this chess game and watching and keeping in mind all the moves, not just the last move, whether it's from the ETs or from the humans, all the moves going back to 47. When you look at the whole strategy from that perspective, without getting too granular, this is where you land. Disclosure, open contact. What about the nukes? We make a decision, and then we go from there. And if we make the right decisions, I believe we are probably in some sort of formal relationship with them very quickly, and we are probably interstellar capable. Not long after that, possibly on our own merit, meaning we're making a lot of strides. Our physicists are closing in on this from several angles, or with a little help from them as well. And so there we are. No nukes, interstellar, engaging other species, probably having to obey some rules, the galactic menu of rules, whatever the hell it is. And we could be 2 or 3 years away from that. We could have had it decades ago. Truth embargo has pushed it forward. But and this is my last point. If there is a time frame to this at all, from their side, it's based on one thing. Meaning they have a schedule too, and at some point they're going to exercise their prerogatives. It's based on one thing. this all has to be sorted out before we have starships. There is no way they are going to let us build starships, fill them up with hydrogen or nuclear bombs or whatever the hell we come up with, and head on out to see what's out there, to go where no man has gone before, right? It's not going to happen. They're not that stupid. So that's the time frame. So the closer we get to being able to build that starship, the more certain they will intervene, meaning they will force the action. They will create disclosure. And what that time frame is not clear, but I put it at no more than 25 years, meaning we could continue like this for 25 years, then we're going to have the starships. And they won't be SpaceX. Well, let me put it this way. If Elon Musk knows about the ET presence, I'm sure he always has plans for the anti-gravitic version of SpaceX, but he's not going to tell us. But he may not know. He knows there's ETs here. He's too smart not to know that. And he's getting a huge amount of mileage from these chemical-based rockets. And even if he knew there was anti-gravitic drive in the hands of the government, he's still going to pursue this chemical space rockets because that's how you get to space. That's how you get your position. You don't wait. But the moment disclosure happens, I'm sure he's already going to be, going, okay, let's get some of that anti-gravitic stuff. Let's get it out here. I want a piece of it. What does it take? And he'll build the SpaceX anti-gravitics, and then he will try to take us to Mars. I'm not going. I have no interest in going. But he's in a position to take, well, he is one of many of the entrepreneurs and hugely wealthy people who will particularly benefit post-disclosure. I mean, he and others will be all over it. And they will literally try to become the alpha in the field. And I would encourage people not to let that get too carried away. This is the ETs are here for the whole globe, not for just a couple of billionaires to have more fun. And so let's try to democratize what happens post-disclosure. But we're that close. And for those that want the truth embargo to go out another 10 years, that means you're going to have to wait 10 more years or longer. Assuming we have 10 years, and I don't think we do. Right? Putin and Medvedev and some other fine Russians can't go a fucking week, can't go a friggin' week without rattling the nuclear saber. And we got this weapon, we got that weapon, we could use it that way, we can do this, we can do that, don't touch us. A lot of people don't know that the Soviets and the Russians, or the Soviet and Russian government, has built way more underground bunkers than we have. That's another thing. It's not something we have a need to know. They built a lot of them. All right. And the whole concept was this. They've always felt nuclear war was inevitable. And if certainly if they initiate it or whatever the circumstance, a whole lot of Russians are going to go underground very, very fast. And the idea is that when it's all over, they're going to come back and run things. That's it. And Putin has a deluxe bunker, of course. I think it's in Siberia. But you've got the wealthy in the United States and other developed countries. They are building deluxe bunkers now. They're building them in other countries like New Zealand, where they're driving the real estate prices up. There's already film out and images out of some of these bunkers. I mean, they've got indoor pools. They've got their own, obviously, they've got the ability to grow food. What do you call it? What's the word for that?
Hydroponic.
Yeah, hydroponic food growing and it, built-in power systems and vast cable, libraries of content and stuff. I mean, these are deluxe bunkers. They're being built now. Now, obviously, that's probably not going to work very well because it's going to be easy to find them, and then the people up top are going to come down and get them, and so they'll have a little bit of fun, but then it'll be all over. And we don't know where China is. But we know about the Russian Soviet Union. They have built a massive amount of bunkers in order to get a lot of Russians out of harm's way so that they can take over. The U.S. hasn't done that. And we got some. We got a lot. And I assure you, the elite know where they are and how to get there. So again, one of these topics that people would rather not discuss or talk about, and we can never know the full truth because it's all part of the classified world. But enough is known about Russia, and nobody should be shocked at this. All right. think back about the instances in the past where various civilizations or groups have built huge underground facilities. What is that one? I can't remember the name. You probably know it, Jack. Roland Yuku. Oh God, I can't remember the name. It's got a great name. Anyway, so huge underground. They've done this before, right? Because humans pretty much are consistent in their behavior, right? And so for whatever reason, they needed to get a lot of people underground in order to survive. We're still doing it. Only the bunkers have gotten bigger, nicer, and so forth. But this is not a good plan. This is not a good plan for the human race. So what can I say? Let's see what happens. Happy to do another show anytime, my friend. One last promo, please. I'm very much involved in a conference coming up called the Contact in the Desert. It is at Indian Wells, 10th anniversary, May 30, June 3, 65 speakers, 7 tracks, a deluxe resort. Maybe we may have a lot to celebrate by May 30 to June 3. You want to be there, please join us. If you want a room in that hotel, you better book it now. You have to book it through the website, contactinthedesert.com, because the conference booked all the rooms, right? In other words, they got them all. So, and then you can get your tickets, but Contact in the Desert, May 30, June 3. So I look forward to seeing some of you there. Jack, maybe you'll be there. And until next time.
All right. Thank you so much for joining us, Steve. I really appreciate it. It's been a real treat. It's been an honor.
My pleasure, sir.
All right. Thank you so much. And see you next time.
Next time. Ad Astra.
Right.
Bye.
Bye.